Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
This is a very important week for the Lakers. They go at home against the Milwaukee Bucks tomorrow, which the Lakers have a couple of really good wins this year, but they don't have that bona fide, signature win against a championship contender with all of their guys healthy. And that game against the Bucks is a great example of an opportunity to get that signature win. They have won their last two games against the Milwaukee Bucks when LeBron James and Anthony Davis both play. I actually think it's a very good matchup for the Lakers because LeBron and AD present a physical and mobile enough front court to be able to hang with Giannis a little bit and give him some problems. So I like that matchup. It's a good opportunity. Then they go on the road to Portland. It's a back-to-back, which makes it a little bit weird, but that's a game they should be able to win. Then they have 2 days off before a game with the Warriors on Saturday, another great opportunity for a big signature win. Then they have one more game after that, after 3 days off, against the Utah Jazz, and then it's the All-Star break. So this is a great opportunity for the Lakers to change the complexion of this season. There's an old saying, and every saying that's a saying is a saying for a reason. And winning cures everything is true in this case. If you're sitting at, what's that? I think they're 28 and 26 right now. So if you're sitting at 30 and 28, and yeah, you're only 2 games over 500, but you're 2 games over 500 with a bunch of signature wins, coming off of the trade deadline, hopefully with some reinforcements on the way, and with a week off with the All-Star break for guys to get healthy and make a real run at things to end the season. It's one of those things where, as bad as this has been, and it's been really bad, because if you talk about the Lakers as a potential threat to win the Western Conference, someone's going to laugh you out of the chat. They've been a joke this season in that regard. But the potential has always been there. The potential has always been, hey, we got LeBron and Anthony Davis. So if you get some signature wins there, a little bit of a win streak, coming into tomorrow's game, they've won 3 consecutive games when LeBron James and Anthony Davis were actually able to finish. Again, not much, but something to build on. And if you build on that with some signature wins in the next week and a half going into the All-Star break, completely changes the vibe of the season. That's how important this is, and that's what's at stake here. These are good teams. These are teams that are better than the Lakers or have been better than the Lakers this season, but they are also teams that the Lakers are capable of beating. And I believe they have a chance to get that done. If you look at the standings, the Lakers are only 3.5 games back of that 6th seed. I think the 6th seed is immensely important to the Lakers because of the fact that winning a playoff series against the Suns or the Warriors is going to be hard enough. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But it's going to be hard enough. If you can buy yourself an extra 2 weeks of playoff basketball against a team like Memphis or against a team like Utah, a team that the Lakers are very much capable of beating, then you have a chance to go into that pivotal matchup against a team like the Warriors or against a team like the Suns and feel more confident in yourself. But the main thing I wanted to talk about at the top of the show tonight was Russell Westbrook. In a more practical sense, I've been very critical of Russell Westbrook over the course of this season. For obvious reasons, he just hasn't panned out as a basketball fit with this group. And I'm hopeful, as I've said, that the Lakers will at least try to trade him before Thursday. However, the far more likely scenario under the circumstances with Russ's contract, the far more likely scenario is that he is still a Laker, at least through the end of this season. So the question becomes, can Russell Westbrook fit alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis? Because he's had some good games recently, but there are good games that existed within the context of him in an elevated role because of injuries. The truth of the matter is we're wondering how Russ can fit as a 4th guy, because Malik Monk, like it or not, is a better offensive option right now than Russ. So it's even more complicated than, can Russ be a number 3? We're asking Russ to be a number 4, at least on the offensive end of the floor. So from that standpoint, the question, there's basically 2 schools of thought. You have the let Russ be Russ camp, which namely includes LeBron James at this point. We saw LeBron after the game against the Knicks the other night go out of his way to talk about how, Russ is an instinctive basketball player and that he has to get out of his head and just play his game. So that's the LeBron school of thought. That's the Russ fan school of thought. All the people that have been defensive of Russ, that's their school of thought. Like the Lakers have not done a good enough job of letting Russ be Russ. But then there's the other school of thought, which is Russ can't be Russ anymore. He's not capable of being Russ anymore. And that's where I land. I look at it like the Carmelo Anthony situation when he was out of the league for a couple of years. There were people that painted that situation as if it was some sort of travesty. How dare they take one of the game's all-time greats and kick him out of the league for a little while? But I looked at it from another perspective. Carmelo Anthony, from a talent perspective, very much belonged in the NBA, even in those years. However, he was not willing to do the job that was associated with his lesser role alongside Paul George and Russell Westbrook, alongside James Harden and Chris Paul. He was unwilling to do that. If you remember, he had press conferences where he complained about the idea that he would never come off the bench. You know, he demanded post touches, and he was just like when he was in his prime, he was less willing to do the other role player things that we ask. So he's out of the league for a little while, and it's kind of a humbling experience. When he first came back to Portland, they used him a lot as a starter because they had to because of injuries. But the reality is when Melo came back, he was much more open to a bench role. He was much more open to a spot-up role. He was much more open to giving up those post touches that he loved so much. And the main reason why is because Melo acknowledged that while his game was declining, he still had elite skills that he brought to the table. He's an elite spot-up shooter. And he has been one of the best wide-open jump shooters in the league this year. And while he's not slashing to the basket and dunking on people anymore, he can put the ball on the floor once or twice and get to a 1 or 2 dribble pull-up, and he can make that shot, attacking a closeout. That's a valuable skill. He's a good rebounder. He's still big and tall and strong, so he can defend in the post, and he can box out and do things along those lines. He honed in on what he was still good at, and he trimmed the fat, the stuff that he was no longer good at, and as a result, he carved out a very interesting role in this league because he's one of the Laker players this year that outperformed his veteran minimum contract. That's the phase that Russell Westbrook is in right now. He is in the phase that Melo was in while he was in OKC and Houston. He is still thinking he's the old Russ without acknowledging the changes and understanding that his place in the league is dependent on him adapting. You know, LeBron called, like I said earlier, LeBron called Russ an instinctive basketball player. Instinctive is just a really nice way of saying he does things without thinking. It's a really nice way of saying he doesn't make reads. Because when you're talking about the best players in playmaking in the league, the top tier, I think, is LeBron and Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Chris Paul. Those guys are never playing off of instinct. There's some muscle memory there. They've seen some defenses so many times that they have muscle memory with the way they react, but they're making reads. They look at what the defense is doing, and they make the play that counters what the defense is doing. That is not instinctive. That is muscle memory and basketball IQ. Calling Russ instinctive is just a really nice way of saying he's not a very smart basketball player. Now, when he was in his absolute physical prime, he was so unbelievably athletic that when he played with instinct, he was still a huge net positive. But as that has faded in his game, that is no longer the case. Now, instinctive Russ comes with downsides, especially when you look at it through the lens of what I was talking about, where Malik Monk is now coming into the picture as a bona fide ball handling option for this team. With Malik Monk and LeBron James and Anthony Davis, it is even more important for Russ to be willing to accept a lesser role. The other way to look at it is kind of like statistical output, right? Like if Russ is being Russ, you might get 12 assists, but you're also going to get like 7 turnovers, right? Or 6 turnovers. You're going to get the aggression that leads to the bad. You know, so the question becomes, would you rather have 12 assists, 7 turnover Russ, or 4 assists, 1 turnover Russ? And I think it's obviously the latter. We need Russ to adapt to that lesser role, especially with Malik Monk's emergence as a guy who no longer goes off of instinct, but a guy who makes reads. You know, there was this funny moment that happened in a game, gosh, it was a couple weeks back. I can't even remember which game it was. But Shaquille O'Neal sitting courtside. And Shaq is kind of bantering back and forth with Russ on the court, and he goes, "You need to slow down." And it's kind of hilarious because Shaquille O'Neal is a center, very much not a initiating perimeter player. He's the last guy in the world you would think would be able to offer real advice to Russell Westbrook. But the funny part is he was dead on. And ironically, Russ actually admitted it in some of his press conferences that he's been taking advice from Shaq about playing slower. To me, playing slower is not about Russ not being athletic or literally playing slow. To me, it's playing slower mentally. It's slowing the game down and making reads rather than playing on instinct. You understand that when you make that adjustment, if you're Russ, you're going to lose some of the top end. You're no longer going to get the crazy scoring out. You're not going to get the 32, 14, and 12 anymore. You understand that that's the trade-off. But the other side of the trade-off is you get a functional role player. Just like what you're getting from Carmelo Anthony right now. Carmelo Anthony is a functional role player now when he was not when he was in Houston, and that literally cost him his spot in the league.